My name is Jasmine Williams, and at 35 years old, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Williams Logistics in title but the office made in practice. I found out that my brothers earned twice as much while doing far less than I did at the family company. When I questioned HR, my father Otis looked me dead in the eye and said, "They are men and you just waste money on shoes." I quit on the spot and he laughed, asking, "Who is going to hire you at your age?" So I started my own competing company and took all the clients with me. But before I tell you how I brought a multi-million-dollar empire to its knees, using nothing but a laptop and my contact list, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to remind a man that you are not his assistant, you are the boss. The nightmare began at 5:15 in the morning on a humid Tuesday in Atlanta. The sun had not even thought about rising, but I was already ankle-deep in hydraulic fluid and frustration on the loading dock of our main warehouse. A container of perishable medical supplies was stuck because the gate code had been changed overnight, and nobody bothered to update the system. The drivers were screaming in Spanish, the warehouse manager was panicking, and I was the only one with the administrative clearance to override the security lock. My phone vibrated against my hip for the 10th time that hour. I wiped grease from my hands onto my pantsuit, which I had foolishly put on thinking today would be an office day, and checked the screen. It was a voice note from my older brother, Dante. I pressed play, hoping for an explanation about the gate code change, since he was technically the vice president of operations. "Yo, jazz cover for me this morning, would you?" Dante's voice slurred through the speaker, heavy with the aftermath of expensive scotch and cigars. "The club was insane last night. I am going to sleep it off. Tell Dad I am meeting a client at the golf course." I stared at the phone. My brother, the vice president, was hungover at 5 in the morning, while I, the chief operating officer, was doing the job of a security guard and a dock worker combined. I looked up at the drivers who were waiting on me. They looked tired. I looked tired. We were all tired of the Williams men. I typed in the override code manually, my fingers flying across the keypad. The gates groaned open and the trucks roared to life. Crisis averted. Again. Not because of the systems my father Otis bragged about in his brochures, but because I was there to fix the mess his sons created. I walked back to my car, my heels clicking against the concrete, a lonely sound in the pre-dawn gray. I had been doing this for 10 years. 10 years of fixing problems I did not create. 10 years of arriving first and leaving last. By 9 o'clock, I had showered, changed into a fresh suit, and was sitting at my desk in the corporate office. The air conditioning was humming, and the chaos of the warehouse felt like a fever dream. I was reviewing the quarterly logistics reports when there was a tentative knock at my door. It was David, the new chief financial officer my father had hired 2 weeks ago. David was young, eager, and terrifyingly incompetent when it came to reading the room. He held a stack of thick, cream-colored envelopes in his hands. "Good morning, Ms. Williams," David said, his smile nervous. "Your father asked me to distribute the quarterly executive bonus checks. He said to just give the whole packet to you since you handle the distribution for the family." I nodded, extending my hand. My father Otis never handled paperwork if he could avoid it. He liked the glory of handing out the big cardboard checks at charity events, but the actual day-to-day finances bored him. I took the envelopes. They were heavy. Expensive paper, the kind that whispered money. David lingered for a moment, then turned and left, closing the door softly. I was alone. I sorted through the stack. One for Otis, one for Dante, one for Tyrell, my younger brother who held the title of Vice President of Business Development, but mostly just developed new ways to lose company data. And one for me. I opened mine first. I was expecting maybe $5,000. The quarter had been rough thanks to a fuel surcharge increase, but I had managed to cut costs in the fleet maintenance division to balance it out. I pulled out the check. $2,500. I stared at the number. 2,500. That was it. That was my reward for 3 months of working 70-hour weeks. That was my reward for saving the medical supply contract this morning. My stomach tightened. Maybe the company was doing worse than I thought. Maybe we were all taking a hit. I picked up Dante's envelope. It was not sealed. My father's administrative assistant usually sealed them, but she was out sick today, which explained why David had brought them directly to me. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but desperation is dangerouser. I slid the check out, $50,000. The air left the room. I blinked thinking I had misread the zeros. But there they were. 5 zeros. Dante, who was currently sleeping off a hangover who had lost 3 clients last month because he forgot to reply to emails, was getting a bonus 20 times larger than mine. My hand started to shake. I reached for Tyrell's envelope. Tyrell, who had spent the last month planning his fantasy football league draft during strategy meetings. $40,000. And then I saw it. Stuck to the back of Tyrell's check was a printout. It was the master payroll summary. David, the new CFO, must have accidentally included it in the stack thinking I needed it for the files. It was the holy grail of secrets in Williams Logistics. I flattened the paper on my desk, my heart hammering against my ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. I ran my finger down the column labeled Base Salary. Dante Williams, Vice President of Operations, $190,000, plus vehicle allowance, plus country club membership. Tyrell Williams, Vice President of Business Development, $160,000, plus vehicle allowance. Jasmine Williams, Chief Operating Officer, $85,000. No vehicle allowance, no club membership. I felt the blood drain from my face. I made $85,000 a year. I knew I was underpaid compared to the industry standard, but I had justified it to myself. I told myself it was a family business. I told myself we were building a legacy. I told myself Dad was tight with money because he wanted to reinvest in the company. But that was a lie. I looked at the date on the document. It was updated last week. My salary was lower than the sales manager I had just hired. I was the COO, and I was making less than the people I supervised. A memory flashed in my mind. Just last week I had stood in my father's office, clutching a quote from a roofer. The roof of my small 2-bedroom condo had sprung a leak during the spring rains. The repair was going to cost $5,000 money I did not have in my savings because I put every spare cent back into my professional development courses. Dad, I had said, feeling small and begging, I need a salary advance, just $5,000. The roof is leaking into my kitchen. Otis had looked at me over his reading glasses, shaking his head with a look of disappointment. Jasmine, you know the company cash flow is tight right now. You need to learn to manage your finances better. You spend too much on clothes. Maybe if you cooked more instead of buying takeout, you would have savings. I had walked out of his office feeling ashamed. I had gone home and put buckets under the leak and eaten ramen for a week to save money. And all the while, Dante was making $190,000. All the while, my father was signing bonus checks for $50,000 to a man who was currently unconscious from partying. They were not broke. They were just broke for me. The shame I had felt last week evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. It started in my toes and worked its way up, turning my blood to ice. I looked around my office. The office I had painted myself because Dad said we did not have the budget for a decorator. The computer I had upgraded with my own money because the company issue laptop was too slow to run the logistics software I needed. I was not a partner, I was not a daughter, I was cheap labor. I reached for my phone. My hands were steady now. Deadly steady. I took photos of everything, the checks, the payroll summary, the memo line on Dante's check that read performance bonus. I made sure the lighting was perfect. I made sure every zero was visible. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a systematic devaluation of my existence. I stood up. I could hear laughter coming from down the hall. The morning executive meeting was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Usually I would be in there early, setting up the projector, printing the agendas, making sure everyone had coffee. Not today. I gathered the checks and the payroll summary. I did not put them back in the envelopes. I held them in my hand like a weapon. I walked out of my office and down the hallway. The carpet was worn in the middle, a path worn by my feet running back and forth solving problems for 10 years. I passed the break room. Sarah, my sister-in-law, and Dante's wife was there. She did not work here, not really. She was on the payroll as a lifestyle consultant, whatever that meant, but mostly she came in to use the high-speed internet for her online shopping and to critique my outfits. She looked up as I passed. "Oh, Jazz," she called out, her voice high and grating. "The coffee machine is out of pods. Can you run to the store? Dante gets cranky if he does not have his dark roast." I did not stop. I did not even look at her. I kept walking, my eyes fixed on the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. The CEO's office. I could hear my father's booming laugh from inside. I could hear Tyrell giggling. They were probably watching sports highlights or sharing a joke about a vendor they had stiffed. They sounded happy. They sounded rich. I reached the doors. I did not knock. I did not smooth my skirt. I did not take a deep breath to compose myself. I was done composing myself. I pushed the doors open with both hands, the wood slamming against the stops with a sound like a gunshot. Otis was sitting behind his massive desk, feet up. Tyrell was on the leather sofa playing a game on his phone. Dante, miraculously awake but looking green, was pouring himself a glass of water at the wet bar. They all froze. Jasmine. Otis barked, frowning. "What is the meaning of this?" "You know I hate it when you barge in. Where is the agenda for the meeting?" I walked to his desk. I did not say a word. I slammed the stack of checks and the payroll summary down right on top of his precious leather blotter. The sound echoed in the room. "What is this?" Otis asked, looking down. He saw the payroll summary first. His face went a shade of red I had never seen before. "Who gave you this?" "Read it," I said, my voice low and vibrating. "Read it out loud." Otis snatched the paper up. "This is confidential company data. You have no right." "I have every right," I cut him off, my voice rising. "I am the chief operating officer. I run this place. I fix the trucks. I handle the drivers. I negotiate the contracts. I am here at 5 in the morning while your sons are stumbling home from the club." I pointed a finger at Dante, who was trying to shrink into the wall. "You pay him $190,000 for what? For a vehicle allowance to drive a Porsche he crashes every 6 months." I pointed at Tyrell. "You pay him $160,000. He does not even know how to open a PDF file. Dad. And me." I slammed my hand on the desk again. $85,000. You denied me $5,000 for a roof that is leaking on my head, while you hand them $90,000 in bonuses this morning." Otis stood up. He was a big man used to intimidation. He leaned over the desk, trying to make me feel small. "Lower your voice, Jasmine," he growled. "You are hysterical." "I am not hysterical," I said, stepping closer. "I am informed. Explain it to me, Dad. Make it make sense. Why is my labor worth less than half of theirs?" Otis looked at me with cold eyes. There was no shame in them. No apology, just annoyance that he had been caught. "Because they are men, Jasmine," he said simply, as if stating the weather. The room went silent. Even Tyrell stopped playing his game. "They are men," Otis repeated, settling back into his chair. "They have families to support. They carry the Williams name. They are the future of this legacy." He looked me up and down with a sneer. You are a woman. You do not have a family. You do not have children. What do you need money for? Shoes bags. Eventually you will get married, and some other man will take care of you. Why should I drain the company accounts to pad your savings when that money is just going to walk out the door to another family? Eventually. I stood there stunned. It was not just greed. It was misogyny so deep and casual it took my breath away. He did not see me as a partner or a successor. He saw me as a temporary liability. Sarah appeared in the doorway behind me. She must have heard the shouting. She was holding a brand new Hermes Birkin bag, the leather gleaming under the office lights. "What is going on?" Sarah asked, looking between us. "Why is she screaming?" "She is jealous, honey," Dante said, finding his voice now that Dad had taken the lead. She found out about the bonuses. She thinks she deserves what I get. Sarah laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. Oh, Jazz, she said, shaking her head. Don't be so greedy. Dante works so hard. He has so much pressure. You live alone in that little condo. You should be grateful your father employs you at all. Look at this bag, though. Dante bought it with his advance. Isn't it gorgeous? She held up the bag. A bag that cost more than my entire year's savings. A bag bought with money I had earned for the company. I looked at the bag. I looked at Sarah's smug face. I looked at Dante's hungover eyes. I looked at Tyrell's indifference. And finally I looked at my father. He was smiling, a small triumphant smile. He thought he had won. He thought he had put me in my place. And in a way he had. He had shown me exactly where my place was. Outside. I reached up and unclipped my ID badge. I took the company credit card out of my wallet. I took the key to the office out of my pocket. I placed them all on the desk next to the evidence of his betrayal. What are you doing? Otis asked, his smile faltering. I am quitting, I said. My voice was not loud anymore. It was dead calm. Effective immediately. Otis laughed, a bark of disbelief. You can't quit. Who is going to run the logistics for the Henderson account? Who is going to manage the warehouse? Dante can do it, I said. He is a man, after all. He needs to support his family. Or Tyrell. I am sure his manly instincts will help him figure out the routing software. I turned to leave. You walk out that door, Jasmine, and you are finished, Otis shouted after me. Who is going to hire you? You are 35 years old. You have only ever worked for me. You have no references. You are nothing without the name Williams. You will be back in a month begging for your job back. And when you do, I am cutting your salary to $50,000. I stopped at the door. I looked back at them one last time. The kings of their little castle built on my broken back. Watch me, I said. I walked out. I did not run. I walked past the cubicles of the staff who looked at me with wide eyes. I walked past the receptionist. I walked out the front door into the Atlanta heat. My phone started ringing immediately. It was the warehouse manager. The container issue had resurfaced. I looked at the screen. Then I powered the phone off. I walked to my car, my own car, not a company lease, and got in. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. I had no job. I had no savings. I had a leaking roof. But for the first time in 10 years, I was not tired. I was awake, and I was dangerous. Otis Williams had made a mistake. He thought he was the architect of this empire, but he was just the owner. I was the architect. I knew where every beam was placed. I knew where the foundation was weak, and I knew exactly how to bring it all down. The elevator ride to the top floor took exactly 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime of suffocation. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, not from fear, but from a rage so pure and hot it felt like I had swallowed a star. I clutched the stack of payroll documents and bonus checks in my hand, so tight the paper was damp with sweat. The elevator doors dinged softly and slid open, revealing the plush carpet and silent air of the executive suite. It was a different world up here. Downstairs in the warehouse, it was sweat and diesel and shouting. Up here, it was climate-controlled silence and the smell of expensive leather. I marched down the hallway past the empty desk of my father's executive assistant, who was conveniently out sick today, leaving me to discover the truth. I did not stop to compose myself. I did not stop to check my reflection in the glass of the framed awards on the wall, awards that claimed Williams Logistics was a leader in fair business practices. I reached the double mahogany doors of the CEO's office, and I did not knock. I kicked the door open. The heavy wood slammed against the stoppers with a violence that made the room jump. Inside it looked less like a place of business and more like a country club lounge. My father Otis was leaned back in his massive ergonomic chair, his feet propped up on the desk, crossing his ankles in Italian leather loafers. On the 60-inch flat screen mounted to the wall, a golf tournament was playing at low volume. My brothers Dante and Tyrell were sprawled on the leather sofas. Dante was nursing a tumbler of amber liquid that looked suspiciously like the 20-year-old Scotch dad kept for clients, and Tyrell was laughing at something on his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that our inventory system was currently crashing. They all froze, looking at me like deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. For a second, nobody moved. The only sound was the polite applause from the golf game on the television. "What the hell?" Jasmine Otis barked, swinging his feet off the desk and sitting up. "You almost broke the door off its hinges. Do you have any idea how much that would cost?" "Learn to knock." He did not ask why I was there. He did not ask why I looked like I had been to war. He only cared about his furniture. That was Otis Williams in a nutshell. Appearance over substance. I walked straight to his desk. I did not look at Dante, who was trying to hide his glass behind his leg. I did not look at Tyrell, who was scrambling to sit up straight. I kept my eyes locked on my father. I slammed the stack of papers down on his pristine blotter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The payroll summary slid across the polished wood, stopping just inches from his hand. "Read it," I said, my voice trembling not with tears, but with the effort of not screaming. Otis looked at the papers, then up at me, his brow furrowing. "What is this? This is confidential HR data. Who gave this to you? Your new CFO?" I spat out. "The one you hired because he is the son of your golf buddy. He handed me the bonus checks to distribute. He forgot to take out the master payroll list." Dante let out a nervous chuckle from the couch. "Oh man, David is an idiot. I told you, Dad." "Shut up, Dante," I snapped without looking at him. "You are earning $190,000 a year to sit on that couch and drink scotch at 10 in the morning." The room went deadly silent. Otis picked up the payroll summary. He did not look ashamed. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed. He scanned the numbers, his face hardening into a mask of irritation. "So now you know," he said, tossing the paper back onto the desk, as if it were a fast food wrapper. "You shouldn't be snooping in things that don't concern you, Jasmine. It is unbecoming." "Unbecoming," I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. "What is unbecoming, Father, is realizing that I am the lowest paid executive in this building, despite being the only one who knows how to run it. I am here at 5 in the morning dealing with customs agents. I am the one negotiating the fuel contracts. I am the one fixing the messes these two create." I pointed at my brothers. Tyrell looked at the floor. Dante glared at me, his jaw tight. "And you pay them double my salary," I continued, my voice rising. "Double, plus bonuses, plus cars, plus club memberships. While I had to beg you for $5,000 to fix a hole in my roof." Otis stood up, then drawing himself up to his full height. He was a big man used to using his size to intimidate people. He leaned over the desk, placing his hands flat on the surface. "Lower your voice," he growled. "You are acting hysterical. This is exactly why you aren't ready for more responsibility. You let your emotions rule you." "I am not emotional," I said, stepping closer until I could smell his expensive cologne. "I am furious. Explain it to me. Give me one good reason why Dante, who lost the Peterson account last month, gets a $50,000 bonus, and I get $2,000. Give me one reason why Tyrell, who thinks supply chain is something you wear around your neck, makes twice what I make." Otis sighed, a long, suffering sound that suggested I was a petulant child asking for a pony. He walked around the desk and stood in front of me, crossing his arms. "Look, Jasmine," he said, his tone condescendingly patient. "It is simple economics and biology. Dante and Tyrell are men. They have families to support. They have wives, they have children. They are building the future of the Williams name. They need the resources to maintain a certain lifestyle that reflects well on the company." I stared at him, unable to process the archaic sexism spewing from his mouth. "And me. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What am I? You are a woman, he said with a shrug. You are single. You have no children. You live in a small condo. What expenses do you have, really? Shoes, handbags. You don't need the same kind of money they do. You are just one person. And eventually you will get married, and your husband will take care of you. Why should I pour company resources into your bank account when that money is just going to leave the family eventually? The logic was so twisted, so deeply offensive that I felt dizzy. He did not see me as an asset. He saw me as a liability. He saw my labor as something he was entitled to, and my compensation as an allowance he granted out of charity. Before I could respond, the office door opened again. Sarah, Dante's wife, breezed in. She was wearing a white tennis skirt and a silk blouse, looking like she had just stepped off a magazine cover. On her arm hung a brand new Birkin bag, the leather gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Hey guys? She chirped, completely misreading the tension in the room. I just wanted to stop by and show Dante what I bought with the bonus check. Isn't it gorgeous? It smells like heaven. She held the bag up, twirling it for us to admire. That bag cost more than my entire car. That bag was paid for by the work I did while Dante was sleeping off hangovers. She looked at me and her smile turned sharp. Oh, hey, Jasmine, you look tired. You should really invest in some better eye cream. You know stress makes you age faster. Why do you always look so intense? You need to relax. Be happy for your brother. He works so hard to provide for us. I looked at Sarah. I looked at the bag. I looked at Dante, who was suddenly very interested in his fingernails. And I looked at Otis, who was watching me with a smug expression, waiting for me to back down. He thought this was over. He thought he had explained the rules of the world to me, and now I would go back to my desk and get back to work. He thought I was trapped. I reached up and unclipped my security badge from my lapel. I dug into my pocket and pulled out the key fob for the company car, a 10-year-old sedan with a check engine light that never turned off. I placed them gently on the desk, next to the evidence of his betrayal. What are you doing? Otis asked, his brow furrowing. I am done, I said, my voice steady and cold. I quit. Otis let out a bark of laughter. You can't quit. You have the Henderson presentation next week. You have the logistics audit. You are the only one who knows the passwords to the server. Then you better start guessing, I said, stepping back. Because I am not doing it. I am not working another minute for a company that values my gender over my contribution. I am not making money for you to buy handbags for your daughter-in-law while my roof leaks. Dante stood up, then looking panicked. Jazz. Come on, don't be like this. You know Dad is just old school. We can talk about a raise next year. Just calm down. No, Dante, I said. Next year never comes. I am taking my skills, my knowledge, and my dignity, and I am walking out that door. Otis sneered, his face turning an ugly shade of red. Go ahead then. Walk out. See how far you get. You are 35 years old, Jasmine. You have spent your entire career under my wing. You have no reputation outside of this building. Who is going to hire you? You are a middle-aged woman with an attitude problem. You will be begging me for your job back in a month. And when you do, the salary is $50,000, take it or leave it. I looked at him one last time. I memorized the arrogance on his face. I memorized the cruelty in his eyes. I memorized the way my brothers looked at me with pity instead of respect. I won't be back, Father, I said, and I won't be looking for a job. I will be building one. I turned on my heel and walked out. I ignored Sarah's gasp. I ignored Dante calling my name. I walked down the hallway, past the staring employees, past the life I had built for 10 years, and I pushed through the front doors into the blinding sunlight. I had no plan. I had no savings. But as the door slammed shut behind me, I felt the first breath of fresh air I had tasted in a decade. The war had just begun. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, staring at my phone. It was vibrating so hard against the center console it sounded like an angry hornet. The screen lit up with the name Otis Williams over and over again. I had not even made it home before the first cracks in the foundation started to show. I knew exactly what was happening inside that building, because I had spent a decade building the systems that were currently failing them. The inventory management server required a dual authentication login every 4 hours. It was a security measure I installed after we lost a shipment 2 years ago. The prompt would have popped up on Tyrell's screen right about now. Tyrell, who had never bothered to learn the password because he said passwords were for nerds. He would be staring at a locked screen while 20 trucks idled at the loading docks burning fuel and patience. My phone stopped ringing for a second, then immediately started again. This time it was a voicemail. I let it go to recording. Then a text message popped up from Dante. It was in all caps. How do you talk to the drivers? They don't speak English. I almost laughed. A bitter, dry sound. The driver spoke perfectly fine English, but they preferred Spanish when they were annoyed, and they were definitely annoyed right now. Dante had spent years making fun of me for taking Spanish classes at night, saying I was wasting my time. Now he was standing on a dock facing a dozen angry Teamsters, and he did not have the words to de-escalate the situation. The phone rang again. Otis. I picked it up this time not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear the panic. Hello, Father, I said calmly. You little witch. Otis screamed, his voice distorted by the poor connection. What did you do to the server? The screens are black. Tyrell says you put a virus in the system before you left. I did not put a virus in the system. I said, watching a woman load groceries into her trunk. It is a security timeout. You need the admin password. Give it to me, he demanded. Give it to me right now or I am calling the police. I leaned back in my seat. The password is in the operations manual, Father. The blue binder. It has been on the shelf behind your desk for 5 years. I updated it every quarter. There is no binder, he shouted. I threw that junk out months ago. I needed space for my golf trophies. You threw out the operations manual, I repeated. Of course he did, because documentation was women's work, because he assumed I would always be there to be the living, breathing manual. Well, that is unfortunate, I said. The password reset takes 24 hours and requires an email confirmation sent to the COO's address, which is me. And since I do not work there anymore, I am afraid I cannot help you. You are doing this on purpose, he roared. You come back here, Jasmine. You come back here and fix this right now. If you are not at your desk in 20 minutes, I am going to sue you for corporate sabotage. I am not an employee, Otis, I said. I am a private citizen, and I am busy. I hung up. Then I blocked his number. I blocked Dante. I blocked Tyrell. I even blocked Sarah just to be safe. The silence that filled the car was heavy, but it was mine. I put the car in gear and drove home, leaving them to drown in the mess they had created. When I unlocked the door to my condo, the reality of what I had done finally hit me. The adrenaline that had carried me out of the office and through the confrontation faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow fear. I walked into my kitchen and saw the bucket on the floor catching the steady drip from the ceiling. Plink, plink, plink. That sound was the rhythm of my financial anxiety. I sat down at my small dining table and opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me, unblinking and cruel. $12,400. That was it. That was my entire life savings. Between the mortgage, the condo fees, the car insurance, and the student loans I was still paying off, I had monthly expenses of about $3,000. If I ate rice and beans and never turned on the lights, I could stretch it to 4 months. 4 months before I lost my home. 4 months before I proved Otis right. The tears came then. I put my head down on the cool laminate of the table and sobbed. I cried for the years I had wasted trying to please a man who saw me as an appliance. I cried for the unfairness of it all. I cried because I was 35 years old, and I was starting over from zero while my brothers were probably ordering lunch on the company card right now. But I only gave myself 10 minutes. My grandmother used to say, you can visit Pity City, but you cannot live there. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but my jaw was set. I was Jasmine Williams. I knew every carrier in the tri-state area. I knew the shipping routes better than Google Maps. I was not nothing. I walked back to the kitchen. I pushed the bills aside. I opened my personal laptop. It was an old machine, the fan whirring loudly as it booted up, but it worked. I needed a name, not Williams. I was done with that name. I looked at the globe sitting on my bookshelf, a gift from a client I had helped navigate a complex international shipment last year. JW Global Solutions. It sounded big. It sounded capable. It sounded like a company that did not hire idiots. I went to the Secretary of State website. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I registered the LLC. I paid the expedited filing fee with my credit card, watching my available balance drop. Then I opened a new tab and started building a website. I used a free template. I wrote the copy myself, highlighting my 15 years of experience, my certifications, my network. I did not have a warehouse. I did not have trucks. I did not have a staff. I was a broker now, a middleman. All I needed was my brain and my phone. I worked until the sun went down. I turned my dining table into a command center. I organized my contact lists, pulling names from memory because I had left my Rolodex behind. I knew who the good drivers were. I knew which carriers were reliable. I knew which clients were unhappy with the current market rates. I was building a raft in the middle of the ocean while the storm raged around me. It was terrifying. It was reckless. And it was the most exhilarating thing I had ever done. At 8 o'clock, my burner phone rang. I had bought a cheap prepaid phone at the grocery store on my way home because I knew I needed a line that my father could not trace. I had sent the number to exactly 3 people: Marcus, the head dispatcher; Elena, the accounts receivable manager; and Big Tony, the foreman of the warehouse. I picked up the phone. "Hello, this is JW Global Solutions." "Jazz, is that you?" Marcus's voice whispered through the line. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet. "It is me, Marcus," I said, leaning forward. "Are you okay? Can you talk?" "I am in the supply closet," he said. "It is a war zone down here, Jazz." Absolute madness. Otis came down to the floor about an hour ago. He started screaming at the drivers, telling them to just load the trucks and figure out the paperwork later. 2 drivers walked off the job. They took their keys. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. Otis thinking he could bully independent contractors the way he bullied his children. "What about the perishables?" I asked. "The medical shipment." Sitting on the dock, Marcus said, "The temperature alarm is going off. Dante told us to just put some ice on it." Ice, Jazz. On a temperature-controlled pharmaceutical shipment. My stomach turned. That shipment was worth $500,000. If it spoiled, the insurance premiums would skyrocket and the client would sue. "Listen to me, Marcus," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Do not touch that shipment. If Dante wants to ruin it, let him do it with his own hands. Do not put your signature on anything." "Do you understand?" "I hear you," Marcus said. "But Jazz, we are scared. Otis is firing people left and right. He fired Verify Linda because she asked how to process the payroll without you. He says we are all replaceable." "You are not replaceable," I said fiercely. "You are the heartbeat of that company, Marcus. You and Elena and Tony, you are the ones who do the work." "What are we going to do?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. "I have a mortgage, Jazz. I have kids. I cannot lose this job." "You are not going to lose anything," I promised him, though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. "I am building something, Marcus. It is small right now. It is just me in my kitchen. But it is going to be real, and it is going to be fair." "You are starting your own thing?" he asked, hope creeping into his voice. "I am, and I am coming back for you, all of you. I need you to hold the line, Marcus. Keep your heads down. Do exactly what they say, even if it is stupid, but document everything. Write down every order Dante gives. Write down every time Tyrell messes up. How long, Marcus asked. How long do we have to wait? Give me a week, I said. Just 1 week. I am going to get a client. I am going to get some cash flow. And then I am going to make you an offer that Otis cannot match. Okay, Jazz, Marcus said. We trust you. We are with you. He hung up. I sat there in the dim light of my kitchen, the silence returning. I had made a promise. I had put my reputation on the line for the people who had been loyal to me. Now I had to deliver. I looked at my laptop screen. The website was live. It looked professional enough. Now I needed a fish. A big one. I opened my mental Rolodex. I thought about all the clients my father had neglected over the years. The ones Dante had been rude to. The ones Tyrell had ignored. There was one name that stood out. Mr. Henderson. He ran a massive pharmaceutical distribution network. He was old school. He valued precision and honesty. And he hated my father. He only stayed with Williams Logistics because I was the one handling his account personally. If Dante messed up that medical shipment today, Henderson would be looking for blood. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. Henderson would still be in his office. He worked late. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my hair even though no one could see me. I picked up my phone. This was it. The first shot in the war. I dialed the number. It rang once. Twice. Henderson Distribution. This is Robert Henderson, a gruff voice answered. Mr. Henderson. I said, my voice steady and professional. This is Jasmine Williams. I am calling to let you know that I am no longer with Williams Logistics. I have started my own firm, JW Global Solutions, and I have reason to believe your shipment in Atlanta is currently compromised. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, pregnant silence. Talk to me, Jasmine Henderson said. And so I did. 1 week later, the silence from my father's camp broke, not with an apology, but with a process server banging on my front door at 7 in the morning. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker holding a thick manila envelope that looked heavy enough to kill a small animal. I signed for it with a shaking hand, my morning coffee suddenly turning to acid in my stomach. I sat on my living room floor and tore the envelope open. It was a lawsuit. A massive, aggressive, terrifying lawsuit. Otis was suing me for breach of contract violation of a non-compete agreement, theft of trade secrets, and corporate espionage. He was throwing every legal term in the book at me, hoping something would stick, or at least scare me into submission. But the lawsuit was just the first wave. By 9 o'clock, my phone started blowing up. It was not clients, it was vendors. People I had worked with for a decade. Jasmine. Is it true, one of our fuel suppliers asked, his voice hushed. I heard Otis telling people you were fired for embezzlement. He said you skimmed $50,000 from the maintenance fund. My blood ran cold. He was not just trying to stop me from working. He was trying to destroy my reputation. He was painting me as a thief to make sure no one in the industry would ever trust me again. Embezzlement. The word made me want to scream. I was the one who balanced the books down to the penny. I was the one who used my own money to buy office supplies when cash flow was tight. I checked my email. There was a message from a carrier I had been trying to woo for my new company. Just one line. Due to recent allegations, we cannot move forward with your contract. Otis was playing scorched earth. He knew he could not beat me on competence, so he was going to beat me on character. He wanted to starve me out before I could even get my first truck on the road. He wanted me broken and begging. I looked at the legal papers again. The law firm was Sterling and Associates. They were the sharks of the corporate world. They charged $600 an hour just to breathe your air. Otis was spending a fortune to crush his own daughter. I did not have money for a lawyer. My bank account was already bleeding from the startup costs. But as I read through the threatening language of the lawsuit, a strange realization began to dawn on me. They were accusing me of violating my employment contract. They were citing specific clauses from the employee handbook. I stood up and walked to the closet where I kept my old tax returns. I dug through the boxes until I found the file from 10 years ago. My first year at the company. I pulled out the tax forms. There it was. The smoking gun. I did not need a lawyer. I just needed a shower and my best suit. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I walked into the marble lobby of Sterling and Associates. I did not have an appointment. I told the receptionist I was there to see Mr. Sterling regarding the Williams Logistics case, and that if he did not see me immediately, he would be explaining to the state bar why he filed a frivolous lawsuit. She looked at my face, saw that I was not bluffing, and made a call. 5 minutes later, I was being ushered into a corner office with a view of the entire city. Mr. Sterling was exactly what I expected. Older white expensive suit, a smile that did not reach his eyes. He sat behind his desk looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Ms. Williams," he said, gesturing to a chair, "I assume you are here to sign the settlement agreement. It is the best offer you are going to get. Your father is very upset, but he is willing to drop the criminal charges if you shut down your company and sign a 10-year non-compete." Criminal charges. I repeated, my voice steady. "You mean the imaginary ones?" "Embezzlement is a serious crime," Sterling said, leaning back. "We have witness statements. Your brother Dante says he saw you taking cash." "Dante," I said with a scoff. "Dante thinks cash flow is a rap song." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was not a legal brief. It was my 1099 tax form from last year. I slid it across the desk. Sterling looked at it. He frowned. "What is this?" "That Mr. Sterling is proof that your client is a liar and a tax cheat," I said. Sterling picked up the paper. "This is a 1099 form. This is for independent contractors." "Exactly," I said, leaning forward. "For 10 years my father has classified me as an independent contractor. He did it to avoid paying payroll taxes. He did it to avoid paying for my health insurance. He did it to keep me off the official company books so he could hide profits." I watched the realization hit him. His eyes widened slightly. "Independent contractors do not sign employee handbooks." I continued, my voice hard. "They do not sign non-compete agreements. In fact, by definition, an independent contractor is free to work for anyone they want, including competitors. That is the trade-off. You save on taxes, you lose control." Sterling set the paper down. He looked a little pale. "If I was an employee bound by a non-compete, then Otis owes the IRS 10 years of back taxes plus penalties and interest," I said. "He also owes me 10 years of overtime pay, because as you know, contractors are paid for every hour they work, and I worked about 80 hours a week." I pulled out a second sheet of paper. It was a spreadsheet. "I calculated it last night," I said. "At my hourly rate, plus the mandatory overtime penalty, plus the unpaid benefits, Otis owes me roughly $400,000, and that is before the IRS gets involved." The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Sterling looked at the papers, then at me. He was a shark, but he knew when there was blood in the water, and right now it was his client's blood. "You filed a lawsuit based on a contract that does not exist," I said. "You accused me of violating employee policies that legally do not apply to me. If we go to court, Mr. Sterling, the first thing the judge is going to ask is why your client misclassified his chief operating officer as a temp worker for a decade." Sterling cleared his throat. He adjusted his tie. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a calculating panic. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice much softer now, "perhaps there has been a misunderstanding regarding your status." "There is no misunderstanding," I said, standing up. "There is just fraud. My father wanted to save money, so he cut corners. Now he wants to use the legal system to bully me. He cannot have it both ways." I pointed at the phone on his desk. "Call him," I said. "Call him right now. Tell him to drop the lawsuit. Tell him to retract the rumors about embezzlement. Tell him that if I hear one more word about me stealing money, I am going to send this entire file to the IRS whistleblower hotline. Sterling stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached for the phone. He did not look at me as he dialed. "Otis," he said, when the line connected. "We have a problem." I did not stay to hear the rest. I turned and walked out of the office, my heels sinking into the expensive carpet. I felt light. I felt powerful. I had walked into the lion's den armed with nothing but the truth, and I had walked out wearing a fur coat. By the time I got back to my car, my phone pinged with an email from Sterling's office. It was a formal notice of dismissal. The lawsuit was dropped with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. I sat in the driver's seat and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a week. I had won the first battle. Otis had tried to use his money and his power to crush me, and I had used his own greed against him. But I knew this was not over. Otis Williams was not the kind of man who took defeat lying down. He was humiliated, and he was scared. That made him dangerous. I started my car. I had a business to run, and now that the legal threat was gone, I could finally focus on the real work, taking his clients. My phone rang again. It was a number I did not recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "This is Jasmine." "Ms. Williams, this is Robert Henderson," a voice barked. My heart skipped a beat. It was the client, the one whose medical shipment was currently melting on my father's loading dock. "I heard you left the company," Henderson said. "I heard there are rumors. The rumors are false, Mr. Henderson." I said, my voice firm. "My father dropped the lawsuit an hour ago because he knows they are false." "I don't care about lawsuits," Henderson said. "I care about my vaccines. I have a shipment stuck in Atlanta. Nobody at Williams is answering the phone. My tracking data says the temperature is rising. Can you help me?" I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "I can help you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "But it is going to cost you a new contract. Name your price," he said. I put the car in gear. The game was on. The situation at the Atlanta depot was deteriorating faster than ice cream on a sidewalk. While I was fighting legal battles in a high-rise office, my brother Dante was busy destroying the company's most valuable relationship 1 degree at a time. The shipment in question was $500,000 worth of temperature-sensitive insulin. It required a constant environment of 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Dante, in his infinite wisdom, had decided to cut costs. Instead of booking the premium refrigerated carrier we had used for years, a company that charged a premium because they guaranteed temperature stability, he had hired a cut-rate independent operator off a load board. I knew exactly why he did it. The premium carrier charged $3,000 for the run. The cheap guy charged $1,200. Dante had pocketed the $1,800 difference, probably logging it as an administrative expense to pay off his credit card bill. But you get what you pay for. The cheap truck had a refrigeration unit that was older than I was. It had failed 2 hours ago just outside the city limits. The driver was sitting on the side of the highway in 90-degree heat, and the internal temperature of the trailer was climbing. 48 degrees, 50 degrees. Every minute that ticked by was costing Henderson Distribution thousands of dollars in spoiled product. My phone was still pressed to my ear. Mr. Henderson was breathing hard on the other end of the line. He was not a man who panicked easily, but this was a disaster that could bankrupt a smaller company. "Jasmine," he said, his voice tight. "The driver says the unit is dead. He says he is waiting for a mechanic, but it could be 4 hours. The product will be ruined by then." I called Otis. I called Dante. Nobody is picking up. "Your father's voicemail is full." Of course it was full. Otis was probably screening calls to avoid dealing with the fallout of my resignation, and Dante was likely hiding in the bathroom trying to figure out how to blame this on the weather. They were cowards. They wanted the title of boss, but they ran from the responsibility. "I can fix it, Mr. Henderson," I said. I was sitting in my car, the engine idling. My mind was racing, pulling up a mental map of every truck currently moving through the southeast. "How?" he asked. "You don't have a fleet anymore, Jasmine. I don't need a fleet, I said. I have relationships. Relationships my father never bothered to cultivate because he was too busy counting pennies. There is a driver named Carlos Rodriguez. He runs a state-of-the-art reefer unit. He is an owner-operator who usually hauls for the big pharmaceutical chains. He owes me a favor because I helped him sort out a billing dispute with a receiver last year when nobody else would listen to him. I checked my mental clock. Carlos usually ends his run in Atlanta on Tuesdays around this time. If he is empty, he can be at that breakdown site in 20 minutes. Call him, Henderson said. Please, Jasmine. If you save this load, I will listen to whatever proposal you have. I hung up and dialed Carlos immediately. He answered on the second ring, the sound of Spanish talk radio in the background. Jazz, he said, his voice warm. Long time no hear. I heard you left the circus. News traveled fast on the road. I did, Carlos, I said. But I need one last miracle. I have a stranded load on I-20 West. Insulin. The reefer died. I need a cross-dock rescue right there on the shoulder. Can you do it? Carlos whistled. That is risky, Jazz. Transferring product on the highway, I know, I said. But if we don't do it, the load is dead. I can get a police escort to close the lane for safety. I still have contacts at the precinct from the charity run we organized last year. I just need a truck that can get cold fast. For you, Jazz. Anything, Carlos said. I just dropped my load in Marietta. I am empty and I have a full tank. Send me the coordinates. I texted him the location. Then I called my contact at the highway patrol. It took 2 minutes of begging and a promise to donate to the policeman's ball, but I got a cruiser dispatched to the scene to oversee the transfer. I called Henderson back. Help is on the way, I said. Carlos will be there in 18 minutes. The police are securing the scene for a transfer. We are going to move the pallets from the broken truck to Carlos's unit. His trailer is already pre-cooled to 36 degrees. Henderson let out a breath that sounded like a sob. You are a lifesaver, Jasmine. I mean it. I am not done yet, I said, my voice turning to steel. I am going to save your product, Mr. Henderson. But before Carlos moves a single pallet, I need something from you. Name it, he said. I want the contract, I said. Not just this load. I want the exclusive contract for all Henderson distribution shipping lanes in the Southeast. I want Williams Logistics fired today. Effective immediately. There was a silence on the line. I held my breath. This was the gamble. I was asking him to sever a 10-year relationship with my father in the middle of a crisis. Send me the paperwork, Henderson said. If that load temperature reads safe when it gets to the warehouse, the contract is yours. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other drafting a contract on my phone using voice to text. I pulled into my driveway just as Carlos texted me a photo. It was a picture of 2 trucks back-to-back on the highway, shoulder blue lights flashing in the background. The pallets were being moved. I ran inside to my kitchen office. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the tracking software Carlos had shared with me. I watched the little blue dot moving on the map. The transfer took 40 minutes. It was agonizing. I watched the temperature sensors on Carlos's truck. When the doors opened to load the freight, the temp spiked to 42 degrees. My heart stopped. If it went over 46, we were dead. Then the doors closed. The graph line started to drop. 41, 40, 38, 36, safe. I slumped back in my chair. Sweat was running down my back. I felt like I had just run a marathon. At 6 o'clock that evening, I received an email from Robert Henderson. The subject line was simply, "Thank you." Attached was a PDF. It was the signed contract. Exclusive rights. 3-year term. Estimated value, $2 million a year. I stared at the screen. I had done it. I had stolen the crown jewel of my father's client list. And I had done it without a warehouse, without a staff, and without a single truck of my own. I had done it with competence. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dante. I debated not answering, but the victory was too sweet not to taste. "Hello, Dante," I said. "What did you do?" he screamed. His voice was hysterical. "Henderson just emailed Dad. He canceled the contract. He said he is moving the business to you. You can't do that. That is our client." "He was your client," I corrected him, "until you decided to ship $500,000 of medicine in a toaster oven to save a few bucks." "That was a mistake," Dante stammered. "I was going to fix it." "You were hiding in your office, Dante," I said. "You didn't even know where the truck was." "Dad is going to kill me," he whispered, and for a second he sounded like a scared little boy. "He should," I said coldly. "You cost him $2 million today." "And Dante?" "What?" he asked. "This is just the beginning." I hung up the phone. I looked around my small kitchen. The bucket was still catching water from the leak. The walls were still bare. But on my screen was a contract that changed everything. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine. I toasted the empty room. One down. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. For the first time in my life, I did not wake up with a sense of dread. I woke up with a plan. Henderson was a big win, but it was dangerous. I had promised him a level of service that required more than just me and a laptop. I needed a team. I knew exactly who I wanted. I had spent 10 years hiring the best people in the business, only to watch my father and brothers beat the enthusiasm out of them. There was Marcus, the dispatcher who could route a truck through a hurricane. There was Elena, who handled billing with the precision of a surgeon. There was Sarah, not my sister-in-law, but the customer service lead, who had a memory like a steel trap. And there were two drivers, Ben and Jerome, who were the most reliable operators in the state. They were all currently working at Williams Logistics. They were all miserable, and they were all underpaid. I opened my laptop and drafted 5 offer letters. I did not have a big budget yet, but the Henderson contract gave me cash flow. I offered them each a 20% raise over what my father was paying. I offered them full health benefits, something Otis had cut 3 years ago to pay for his new boat. And most importantly, I offered them equity. Profit sharing. If we won, they won. I sent the emails at 8 o'clock in the morning, just as they would be arriving at the Williams office to face another day of Dante's incompetence and Otis's yelling. Then I waited. At 8:15 my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Jazz," he said, his voice low. "Is this real?" "It is real, Marcus," I said. "I got the Henderson contract. We are live." There was a silence on the line. Then I heard a sound I had not heard in that office in years. Laughter. "I am looking at Dante right now," Marcus said. "He is trying to figure out why the coffee machine won't work. He looks like he is about to cry." "Pack your box, Marcus," I said. "I rented a co-working space downtown. We start at 9. "I am gone," he said. By 8:30 I had heard from all 5 of them. They were all in. At 9 o'clock I walked into the Keo working space. It was just a glass-walled room with a few desks and a whiteboard, but it felt like a palace. My team started trickling in. They looked nervous, but they also looked excited. They were carrying boxes of personal items, photos of their kids' lucky staplers. They had walked out. They had left Otis high and dry. We spent the morning setting up. We routed the Henderson shipments. We called carriers. We set up the billing system. The energy in the room was electric. We were pirates stealing a ship and sailing it better than the Navy ever could. Around noon my phone buzzed. It was a notification from social media. Someone had tagged me in a live video. It was Sarah, my sister-in-law. She was standing in the parking lot of my co-working building. She was holding her phone up, filming herself screaming at the building. "She is in there!" Sarah shrieked at the camera, her perfect makeup smeared. "Jasmine Williams is a thief. She stole our employees. She stole our clients. She is running an illegal operation. Do not do business with her." She was standing next to her new white Range Rover, the one the company leased for her. I looked at my team. They looked worried. "Is she going to cause trouble?" Elena asked. I stood up. "No," I said. "She is going to give us free publicity." I walked downstairs. I did not hide. I walked right out the front door, phone in hand, live streaming right back at her. Sarah saw me and lunged forward. "You witch!" she screamed. "How could you do this to family? Dante is having a panic attack. Dad is in the hospital with high blood pressure because of you. Your husband is having a panic attack because he is incompetent, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and loud enough for her viewers to hear. "And your father-in-law is in the hospital because he realized he bet on the wrong horse." "You stole our people," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the building. "People are not property, Sarah," I said. "They left because I pay them what they are worth. They left because I treat them with respect. Something you know nothing about." I walked closer to her. I pointed the camera at her Range Rover. "Nice car," I said. "Did you know that the lease payment on that car is exactly equal to the monthly health insurance premiums for the 5 people who just quit? Otis canceled their insurance to pay for your heated seats." Sarah's face went pale. "That is a lie," she stammered. "It is public record," I said, bluffing slightly, but knowing I was close enough to the truth. "You are driving around in my employee's healthcare." I looked into her camera lens. "If anyone watching this wants to work for a company that pays for talent instead of luxury cars for the owner's family, come see me. We are hiring." Sarah lowered her phone. She looked around. People on the street were stopping to watch. She realized she had made a mistake. She had tried to bully me, and I had turned it into a recruitment ad. She got in her car and peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. I turned off my phone. I walked back upstairs. My team was standing at the window watching. When I walked in, they started clapping. It was a small victory, but it felt good. We had survived the first counterattack. But I knew Otis. He was down, but he was not out. He would be coming for me. And next time, he would not send his daughter-in-law. He would come himself. The Henderson contract was the fuel, but I needed an engine. Working out of a co-working space was a temporary fix, and my kitchen table was a liability. I needed a war room. I spent the morning scouring real estate listings for something immediate, something turnkey. I found it in an old industrial park near the airport. It was a small suite barely larger than my living room, with beige carpets that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. But it had a door that locked a dedicated fiber optic line, and it was mine. I signed the lease with a shaking hand, handing over a cashier's check that took a significant bite out of the advance Henderson had wired me. Once I had the keys, I sat on the floor of the empty office and pulled out my burner phone. It was time to make the calls that would break my father's back. I knew exactly who I needed. I needed the brain trust. The people who actually made the gears turn while Dante and Tyrell were busy playing executive. First was Marcus, the head dispatcher. Then Elena, who ran accounts receivable with a terrifying efficiency. Next was Samantha, the customer service lead, who knew every client's birthday and dog's name. Finally, Ben and Jerome, the best drivers in the fleet. I called Marcus first. He answered on the first ring. "I have an office, Marcus," I said. 1400 Industrial Way. Suite B. It is not much, but the coffee will be fresh. What is the offer, Jazz?" he asked, his voice low. I took a breath. This was the math I had agonized over all night. I was betting everything on this. 20% increase on your current base salary, I said. Full medical and dental benefits starting day 1. 2 weeks paid vacation. And equity. 5% profit sharing vested over 3 years. There was a long silence on the line. I knew what he was thinking. Otis had cut their health insurance 3 years ago, claiming premiums were too high while simultaneously leasing a new boat. Health insurance. Marcus asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Real insurance, Blue Cross," I said. "The good stuff. I put down the deposit this morning." "I am in," he said. "I am so in." I made the next 4 calls. Elena cried when I mentioned the dental plan because her daughter needed braces. Samantha agreed before I even finished the sentence. Ben and Jerome were harder. They were worried about the stability of a startup, But when I told them I had the Henderson contract locked down, they signed on. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, I had 5 verbal acceptances. I sat in the middle of my empty office as the sun went down, casting long shadows across the beige carpet. I did not have desks yet. I did not have chairs. But I had a team. And tomorrow, we were going to execute the most coordinated walkout in the history of Williams Logistics. The next morning broke with a heavy, humid heat that promised a storm. I was at the new office by 6, setting up the folding tables and plastic chairs I had bought at a discount store. I had 5 laptops lined up ready to go. At 8 o'clock sharp, the phones at Williams Logistics would start ringing. That was when the first wave of daily pickups were scheduled. But today, there would be nobody to answer them. I had instructed my team to coordinate their resignations. They were to walk in at 8:55, just before the morning meeting, place their letters on Otis's desk, and walk out together. No arguments. No exit interviews. Just ghost. I paced the small office, checking my watch. 8:50. 8:55. At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Done. We are in the parking lot. Dante is chasing us. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 10 minutes later, my new employees started arriving. They looked exhilaratingly terrified. Marcus walked in first, holding a box of personal items. He looked like a man who had just jumped out of a plane and survived. You should have seen his face, Jazz, Marcus said, dumping his box on a folding table. Otis was screaming. He threw a stapler. He told us we were all ungrateful traitors. Dante was trying to block the door. Did you sign anything, I asked? Nothing, Marcus said. We just dropped the letters and left. The phones were ringing off the hook when we walked out. Nobody was answering. Good, I said. Let them ring. By 10 o'clock, we were operational. It was chaotic. We were sitting on plastic chairs, shouting over each other, routing trucks and calming down confused drivers. But we were working. And for the first time in years, these people were smiling while they worked. Across town, Williams Logistics was melting down. I knew this because my phone was blowing up with texts from the drivers who were still stuck over there. Nobody is giving us load numbers. Gate is locked. Who do I send the bill of lading to? I didn't answer them. I couldn't. I had to focus on my own ship. But I knew the silence at my father's company was deafening. He had lost his dispatch, his billing, his customer service, and his 2 best drivers in the span of 5 minutes. He was a general without an army. And then the Queen arrived. It was just after 11 when a white Range Rover screeched into the parking lot of our industrial park. I saw it through the front window. It parked diagonally across 2 spaces, taking up half the available room. Sarah got out. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a pink tracksuit that probably cost more than my rent. She looked furious. She slammed the car door so hard I felt the vibration through the glass. Here we go, I muttered, standing up. My team looked up. They saw Sarah marching toward the door. They looked nervous. Sarah had a reputation for being vicious when she felt slighted. Keep working, I told them, my voice calm. I will handle this. I walked to the front door and stepped outside just as Sarah reached the sidewalk. I closed the door behind me. I didn't want her toxicity contaminating my new workspace. Sarah stopped a few feet away from me. She pulled down her sunglasses. Her eyes were puffy, like she had been crying or screaming or both. You little thief, she spat. You ruin everything, don't you? Hello, Sarah, I said, crossing my arms. Can I help you with something? You stole our employees, she shrieked, her voice echoing off the brick buildings. You stole Marcus. You stole Elena. Do you know what you have done? Dante is inside right now, trying to figure out how to dispatch a fleet of trucks. He is having a panic attack. He can't breathe. That sounds like a personal problem, Sarah, I said. Maybe he should have learned how to do his job instead of playing golf. This is illegal, she screamed, stepping closer. You can't just take people. We own them. You don't own people, Sarah, I said, my voice hardening. That is slavery. This is employment. They left because they wanted to. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She started recording me holding the camera aggressively in my face. "I am going live," she hissed. "I am going to show the world what a snake you are. Everyone is going to know that Jasmine Williams is a bitter, jealous little girl who steals from her own family." I looked at the phone. I looked at the red recording dot. "Go ahead," I said. She started talking to her followers, her voice pitching up into that fake influencer whine. "Guys, you won't believe this. My husband's sister just destroyed our family business. She stole all our staff. She is jealous of our success. Look at her. She is working out of this dump because she can't afford a real office." I pulled out my own phone. I opened my social media app. I hit the live button. I pointed my camera at Sarah. I pointed it at her Range Rover. "Hi everyone," I said to my own camera, my voice loud and clear. "This is Jasmine Williams, owner of JW Global. I have a special guest today. This is my sister-in-law, Sarah." Sarah looked confused. She faltered in her rant. "Sarah is very upset because 5 people quit my father's company today to come work for me." I continued walking around her so my camera caught the gleaming white SUV in the background. "She says I stole them. But the truth is, I just offered them health insurance." I zoomed in on the car. "You see this car, guys? This is a Range Rover autobiography. The lease payment on this car is roughly $2,000 a month. Do you know what else costs $2,000 a month?" I turned the camera back to Sarah, who was now looking less like a lioness and more like a trapped rat. "The health insurance premiums for the 5 employees who just quit. My father canceled their insurance 3 years ago. He told them the company couldn't afford it. But then the company leased this car for Sarah, who does not even work there." Sarah lowered her phone. "Stop it," she said. "Stop recording." "No, Sarah," I said, stepping closer. "You wanted to go live. Let's go live. Let's tell the world how Williams Logistics works. Let's tell them that you are driving around in the unpaid wages of the people who actually do the work. Let's tell them that my brother Dante, your husband, makes double my salary to sit in an office and nap while I built the company he is currently destroying." The comments on my screen were scrolling fast. People were reacting. They were angry. "This is what theft looks like, Sarah," I said, pointing at her car. "It doesn't look like a woman starting a business in a warehouse. It looks like a white SUV paid for by denying medical care to working families." Sarah's face turned a blotchy red. She looked at her phone, then at mine. She realized she had lost control of the narrative. She realized she wasn't the victim here. She was the villain. She turned and ran to her car. She fumbled with the keys, scratching the door handle in her haste. She jumped in and reversed out of the spot, nearly hitting a dumpster. She sped away, the engine roaring, a cloud of exhaust hanging in the humid air. I watched her go. I ended my live stream. I saved the video. Receipts. I walked back inside. The office was quiet. My team was staring at me. Marcus had a look of awe on his face. "Did you really just do that?" he asked. I smoothed my shirt. I sat down at my folding table. "Back to work, everyone," I said. "We have freight to move." They cheered. It was a ragged, spontaneous sound, but it was the best thing I had heard all day. We were not just a company anymore. We were a resistance, and we just won our first skirmish. November arrived with a chill that settled deep in my bones, not from the weather, but from the incessant ringing of my phone. It was Thanksgiving week and my mother was on a campaign of emotional attrition. She called me 5 times a day, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful to demanding. She said the family was falling apart without me. She said tradition mattered. She said Dad was willing to let bygones be bygones if I just came to dinner. I knew exactly what that meant. Otis Williams did not know the meaning of the word forgive. If he wanted me at the table, it was because he needed something. My sources told me Williams Logistics was hemorrhaging money. The Henderson loss had triggered a domino effect, and 3 other mid-sized clients had walked in October. The warehouse was operating at 40% capacity, and the remaining drivers were threatening to unionize. Otis didn't want a family reunion, he wanted a free consultant. I finally picked up on Tuesday. "Jasmine, baby, please." My mother pleaded, her voice thick with that specific guilt only a Southern matriarch can weaponize. "Just come for an hour. It is Thanksgiving. We have never spent it apart. Your father promised to be civil. He even bought that expensive cranberry sauce you like." I looked at my calendar. I had a contract review scheduled for Friday morning with a massive automotive parts supplier. It was the deal that would push JW Global into the 8-figure revenue bracket. I didn't need their turkey, and I certainly didn't need their drama. But a part of me, the part that was still the little girl wanting her daddy's approval, was curious. I wanted to see the rot with my own eyes. "Fine, Mom," I said. "I will come for dinner, but I am leaving by 8. I pulled up to the family estate at 6 o'clock sharp. The house looked the same, imposing and manicured, but there were subtle signs of neglect I had never noticed before. The landscaping was a little overgrown, the fountain in the driveway was turned off, and parked right in front in the spot usually reserved for guests was Dante's Porsche Panamera. It was dusty. Otis met me at the door. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that looked a size too big for him now. He had lost weight, his eyes were shadowed, but the arrogance was still there, locked in the set of his jaw. "Hello, daughter," he said stiffly, holding the door open. "Nice of you to finally show up." "Hello, father," I said, stepping past him. The house smelled of rosemary and denial. We moved into the dining room where the table was set with the good china, the stuff we were usually only allowed to look at. Dante and Sarah were already seated. Sarah was wearing last season's Gucci, looking at her phone. She didn't look up when I entered. Tyrell was already eating a bread roll, crumbs falling onto his silk tie. "Sit down," Otis commanded, pointing to my old seat. The one near the kitchen door. The servant's seat. I sat. I unfolded my napkin. I waited for the show to begin. Dinner was a masterclass in delusion. My mother bustled back and forth, bringing out platters of turkey and stuffing, trying desperately to fill the silence with chatter about the weather and the neighbors. Otis carved the bird with a violence that suggested he was imagining it was my neck. So Dante Otis boomed, passing a plate of dry meat to Tyrell. "Tell us about the Miami expansion. How are the numbers looking?" I took a sip of my water to hide my smile. There was no Miami expansion. I knew for a fact that the Miami office was just a P.O. box Dante had rented to hide credit card bills from Sarah. "It is booming, Dad," Dante said, his voice too loud. "We are crushing it. I have 3 new clients lined up. Big players. We are going to double revenue by Q1. "That is my boy," Otis said, beaming a look of pure adoration he had never once directed at me. "And Tyrell? How is the software upgrade coming?" Tyrell choked on his wine. "Oh, it is great, Dad. Really complex stuff. The developers are saying we are light years ahead of the competition. We are going to revolutionize the industry." I cut into my turkey. It was sawdust. Tyrell hadn't spoken to a developer in 6 months. The software license had lapsed in September because nobody paid the renewal fee. They were running the entire company on free trials and spreadsheets. "It is good to see someone building something real," Otis said, turning his gaze on me. "Not like these little pop-up shops trying to scavenge scraps." "So, Jasmine, how is your little project going? Still playing pretend?" Sarah snickered into her wineglass. "I heard you are working out of a warehouse district," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Is it safe there? I would be terrified to park my car in that neighborhood." "My office is secure, Sarah," I said calmly. "And business is fine." "Fine," Otis scoffed. "Fine doesn't pay the mortgage, Jasmine. I heard you are undercutting rates just to get business. That is a race to the bottom. You will be bankrupt by Christmas. But do not worry. When you fail, the family will still be here. I am a forgiving man. I might even find a place for you in data entry. We need someone to scan invoices." He paused, waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to scream or cry or defend myself. He wanted the fight. He wanted to feel powerful by crushing me. I just chewed my food. I swallowed. I wiped my mouth. The turkey is a little dry, Mom, I said. Otis turned purple. He opened his mouth to launch into a tirade about respect and gratitude when the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound, not a guest ring, an official ring. Who is that? My mother asked, looking alarmed. We didn't invite anyone else. Probably a delivery, Dante said, waving a hand. I ordered some cigars. Sarah, go get it. Sarah rolled her eyes but got up. She walked to the front door, her heels clicking on the marble foyer. We heard the door open. Then we heard a deep male voice. Mr. Dante Williams. Yeah, that is me, Dante shouted from the table. Just leave it on the porch. Sir, you need to come outside, the voice called back. We have a repossession order for the 2023 Porsche Panamera. The silence in the dining room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Dante dropped his fork. It clattered against the fine china like a cymbal crash. What Sarah whispered from the hallway. Dante scrambled up from his chair, knocking it over. There is a mistake, he stammered, his face draining of color. I paid it. Dad paid it. The company paid it. Otis stood up slowly. His hands were shaking. Dante, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Did you pay the lease? I sent the check. Dante lied, backing away. It must be in the mail. The mail is slow, Dad, you know that. We heard the distinct sound of a diesel engine revving up outside, the grinding of hydraulics, the sound of a car being lifted. Sarah screamed. No, my car seat is in there. My sunglasses. She ran out the door. Dante followed her, stumbling over his own feet. Otis stood frozen at the head of the table, staring at the empty doorway. Tyrell kept eating his roll, eyes wide. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I picked up my purse. This has been lovely, Mom, I said to my mother, who was weeping silently into her napkin. But I really have to go. You can't go, Otis whispered, not looking at me. We are in a crisis. No, Father, I said, walking toward the door. You are in a crisis. I am in a growth phase. I walked out onto the front porch. The tow truck was already backing out of the driveway, the Porsche hooked up and dangling like a dead fish. Sarah was pounding on the window of the truck, screaming at the driver. Dante was on his phone, presumably yelling at a bank that had stopped listening months ago. I walked past them. I walked past the repo man who tipped his hat to me. I got into my car, my own car paid for with cash from my own profits. Where are you going? Dante screamed at me as I started the engine. Do something, Jazz. You know these people. Call them off. I rolled down the window. The cold November air rushed in. I can't, Dante, I said. I have a meeting. A meeting. On Thanksgiving, he yelled. Money doesn't sleep, big brother, I said. And neither do I. I rolled up the window. I put the car in drive. And I left them there, screaming on the lawn of a house they could no longer afford to heat. 3 months later, the winter had turned Williams Logistics into a frozen wasteland. The hemorrhage of clients had not stopped with Henderson. It had become a full-blown epidemic. 70% of the revenue was gone. The warehouse that used to hum with the sound of forklifts and shouting voices was now echoing and silent. The remaining staff walked around like ghosts, waiting for the inevitable pink slip. I knew all of this because my new employees still had friends on the inside. They told me everything. They told me about the silence. They told me about the panic. And they told me about Tyrell's masterpiece. It happened on a Tuesday in February. Tyrell had been tasked with a simple job. He needed to archive old client data to free up server space because they were too cheap to buy more storage. Instead of archiving, he hit delete. He deleted the entire customer relationship management database. 10 years of contacts, 10 years of shipping history, 10 years of pricing data, gone in a single click. When Otis found out, he didn't even scream. He just stared at the blank screen, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. There was no backup. The backup drive had failed 6 months ago, and Dante had used the replacement budget to buy courtside seats to a basketball game. They were flying blind. They didn't know who owed them money. They didn't know who needed trucks. They didn't even know the phone numbers of the few clients who hadn't fired them yet. That afternoon, a small shipment came in. It was just 20 pallets of auto parts, a mercy load from a client who hadn't heard the news yet. But there were no warehouse workers to unload it. The last forklift driver had quit that morning after his paycheck bounced. Otis looked at Dante. Dante looked at his phone, pretending to be busy. Otis looked at Tyrell. Tyrell looked like he was about to vomit. Fine, Otis spat, throwing his suit jacket on the floor. I will do it myself. He marched down to the loading dock. He was 65 years old. He was overweight, he had high blood pressure, and he hadn't lifted anything heavier than a golf club in 20 years. He climbed onto the forklift. He managed to get the pallet off the truck. But when he tried to adjust it manually because he had parked it crooked, he slipped. He tried to catch the weight of a 200-pound crate with his bare hands. The sound was audible across the warehouse. A wet, sickening snap. Otis went down screaming. He writhed on the concrete, clutching his lower back. The driver watched in horror. Dante and Tyrell ran out from the office, but they didn't know what to do. They just stood there, hovering while their father screamed in agony. It took the ambulance 20 minutes to arrive. They had to load the CEO of Williams Logistics onto a stretcher, while he wept not just from the pain of a herniated disc, but from the humiliation of lying broken on the floor of his own failing empire. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting when my personal phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the area code was from the local hospital. I stepped out of the conference room where my team was finalizing the logistics for a new nationwide retail chain and answered. Jasmine, a voice croaked. It sounded weak, small, and terrified. It was my father. I am here, Otis, I said, leaning against the glass wall of my office. I heard you had an accident. I am in the hospital, he wheezed. His voice was thick, probably from painkillers. My back, Jazz. I can't move. The doctor says I need surgery. I might not walk right for months. I am sorry to hear that, I said. My voice was neutral. I wasn't happy he was hurt, but I wasn't devastated either. It felt like reading about a stranger in the newspaper. The company is in trouble, Jazz, he whispered. The boys, they can't handle it. Tyrell deleted the database. Dante is useless without direction. The drivers are threatening to sue. I know, I said. I heard. You have to come back, he said. It wasn't a command this time. It was a beg. A desperate, clawing plea. I need you. The family needs you. I looked through the glass wall at my team. Marcus was laughing on the phone with a driver. Elena was high-fiving Sarah. They were happy. They were safe. What are you proposing, Otis? I asked. I have been thinking, he said, his voice gaining a little strength as he tried to negotiate. I was wrong to let you go. You have value. I see that now. So here is the deal. You come back, you bring your team, we merge the operations, and I asked, waiting for the punchline. And I will make you vice president, he said. You will report to Dante. He is the president, obviously, because he is the eldest son. But you will do the operations. You will run the day-to-day. You can fix the mess. You are good at cleaning up messes, Jasmine. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to believe what I was hearing. He was lying in a hospital bed, his company in ruins, his back broken, and he still had the audacity to insult me. Vice President, I repeated slowly. Under Dante. Yes, Otis said, sounding relieved, thinking I was considering it. Dante needs support. He is a big-picture guy. You are a details girl. It is a perfect team. You save the company, you get a salary again, maybe even a small raise from what you were making before. And you get to be part of the legacy again. I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a loud, genuine belly laugh that made the receptionist look up from her desk. A details girl, I said, savoring the insult. A salary. Jasmine. Why are you laughing? Otis asked, his voice trembling. This is serious. I know it is serious, Otis, I said, but you are the one telling jokes. I walked back into my office and sat in my chair, my leather chair, in my corner office. Let me tell you where I am right now, Father, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am sitting in my office at JW Global. My revenue last month was double what Williams Logistics made in its best year. I have 25 happy employees. I have the Henderson contract. I have the Smithfield account. And I just signed the retail chain you have been trying to get for 5 years. Otis was silent on the other end. All I could hear was the beeping of his heart monitor. You want me to come back and work for Dante? I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. Dante, who let $500,000 of insulin spoil on the highway? Dante, who bought a Porsche with company funds while you cut health insurance? You want me to serve the man who helped destroy your legacy? He is your brother, Otis whispered. He is family. He is a liability, I corrected him. And so are you. You built a house of cards on a foundation of misogyny and greed, and now you are surprised it is falling down on top of you. Jasmine, please, he sobbed. I am begging you. I can't lose the company. It is all I have. Then you should have treated the person who ran it with respect, I said. I am not coming back, Otis. Not as a vice president, not as a details girl, and certainly not to save Dante. But who will run it, he cried. Who will save us? You told me once that they are men, I said, quoting his own words back to him. You said they have families to support. You said they are the future. Well, Father, let the future handle it. Let your precious sons figure out how to restore a database they deleted. Let them figure out how to pay the debts they accrued. You can't do this, he said, his voice turning from begging to venomous. You are cruel. You are a traitor. I am a CEO, I said, and I don't hire failures. I hung up the phone. I didn't block the number this time. I wanted him to call back. I wanted him to try again. Because every time he called, it just confirmed that I had won. I looked at my computer screen. An email had just come in. It was a notification about a new government contract. A medical transport bid. $50 million. I smiled. Otis was worried about saving his warehouse. I was about to buy the state. I clicked reply. It was time to finish this. The government contract hit the market on a rainy Tuesday in March like a bomb drop that everyone heard, but only a few could survive. It was a request for proposal from the Department of Health worth $50 million over 5 years to manage the statewide distribution of critical medical equipment and vaccines. It was the kind of contract that built dynasties. For my father, Otis Williams, it was not just an opportunity, it was the last gasp of air before drowning. I knew exactly what was happening inside the crumbling walls of Williams Logistics, because news in our industry travels faster than a fiber optic cable. Otis had dragged himself back to the office against medical advice, sitting in his ergonomic chair, with a back brace barking orders at my brothers. They were staring at a balance sheet that bled red ink. The company was insolvent. They had lost 70% of their revenue, they had outstanding lawsuits from unpaid vendors, and their credit rating was junk status. There was absolutely no way they qualified for a federal contract that required a rigorous financial audit. But desperation breeds delusion. Otis looked at Dante and Tyrell and gave the order that would seal their fate. He told them to fix the numbers. He did not mean improve the business, he meant cook the books. I could imagine the scene perfectly. Otis sweating through his painkillers, telling Dante to delete the accounts payable column to make it look like they had cash reserves. He was telling Tyrell to falsify the fleet maintenance records to show they had 50 operational trucks, when I knew for a fact they only had 12 that could pass a Department of Transportation inspection. They were building a Trojan horse out of cardboard, and lies, hoping that the government inspectors would not look too closely. It was their Hail Mary pass. If they won the $50 million, they could pay off the debts, fix the trucks, and pretend the last year never happened. If they lost, they went to prison. Otis was betting his freedom on the arrogance that he was smarter than the federal government. He looked at his son's men who could not even manage a lunch order without screwing it up, and entrusted them with committing federal fraud. While my family was busy inventing a fantasy, I was busy building a fortress. I sat in my office at JW Global, staring at the bid requirements. I knew the logistics inside and out. I knew the routes, the temperature requirements, the driver certifications. I could do the work in my sleep. But there was one hurdle I could not clear alone. The contract required a surety bond of $5 million. It was a guarantee that if the company failed, the government would get paid. My company was successful wildly, so for a startup, but I did not have $5 million in liquid assets to park in an escrow account. I had reinvested everything into growth. I looked at the numbers on my screen. I had the talent. I had the plan. I just lacked the war chest. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I had saved 6 months ago at a logistics conference in Chicago. Beatrice Thorne. She was a legend in the industry, a self-made billionaire who owned a fleet of cargo ships and a global freight network. She had approached me after a panel I spoke on about modernizing supply chains. She had told me I had grit. She had told me to call her if I ever wanted to play in the big leagues. This was the big leagues. I called her personal line. She answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and no nonsense. "Jasmine Williams," she said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I have a proposition, Beatrice," I said. "The Department of Health contract just went live, $50 million. I have the infrastructure and the strategy to win it, but I need a financial partner for the bond." Beatrice was silent for a moment. I heard the scratching of a pen on paper. "I saw that contract," she said. "It is messy, high liability, strict penalties for delays." "It is only messy if you do not know the terrain," I countered. "I know every hospital loading dock in the state. I know the traffic patterns. I know the drivers. I can run this with a 99% efficiency rating." "And your competition?" she asked. "My father," I said. "Williams Logistics. They are going to bid." Beatrice chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "The dinosaurs. They are bankrupt, Jasmine. Everyone knows it." "They are desperate," I corrected. "They are going to lowball the bid and lie about their capacity. They will try to win on price. I want to win on competence. But I need your backing to get a seat at the table." "Meet me for lunch," Beatrice said. "The Capitol Grill, 12:30. Bring your numbers." I walked into that lunch with a binder full of spreadsheets and walked out with a partner. Beatrice did not just agree to cover the bond, she agreed to leverage her international network to lower our equipment costs. It was a partnership made of steel. We were two women in an industry dominated by men like my father, and we were about to take everything. Otis thought he was fighting for survival. He did not realize he was stepping into the ring with a tag team that had sledgehammers in their gloves. We spent the next week refining our proposal. It was perfect. It was honest. And it was lethal. 2 nights before the bid deadline, I was working late in my office. The building was quiet, the only light coming from my desk lamp and the glow of the city outside. I was reviewing the final compliance documents when my phone buzzed with a notification from the security app. "Motion detected. Rear entrance." I frowned. My staff had all gone home hours ago. The cleaning crew did not come until Thursday. I tapped the notification, and the camera feed popped up on my screen. It was grainy black and white footage, but the figure was unmistakable. A man in a dark hoodie was trying to pry open the back door with a crowbar. He was clumsy, slipping on the wet pavement, struggling with the lock. He turned his face toward the camera for a split second, and the infrared light illuminated his features. It was Tyrell. My stomach dropped. My little brother was trying to break into my office. It was not a random burglary. Otis must have sent him. They knew I was bidding. They knew I was a threat. They wanted to see my numbers, or maybe they wanted to sabotage my servers. I did not scream. I did not run. I watched him on the screen with a detachment that frightened me. He managed to pop the lock and stumbled into the hallway. I picked up my desk phone and dialed 911. "There is a break-in in progress at 1400 Industrial Way," I said calmly. "The perpetrator is inside the building." Then I watched. I watched on my internal cameras as Tyrell crept down the hallway. He went straight for the server room. He did not know that our data was all cloud-based now. He did not know that the physical servers in that room were just backups for the backups. He was looking for a physical drive to steal or destroy. He was pulling at wires when the police arrived. They did not use sirens. They just surrounded the building. I saw the flashlights sweeping through the windows. I saw Tyrell freeze like a rabbit. When the officers kicked in the door, Tyrell tried to run out the back, but there was a K-9 unit waiting for him. I watched my brother get tackled to the ground. I watched them cuff his hands behind his back. I watched him crying, shouting that his father owned this town. I walked out of my office and down the hall. The police were dragging Tyrell to his feet. He looked up and saw me standing there in my suit, arms crossed. "Jazz," he whimpered. "Jazz, tell them. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. I just needed to borrow something." I looked at the officer. "I do not know this man," I said. "I want to press charges for breaking and entering and attempted corporate espionage." Tyrell screamed as they dragged him out. He screamed that I was evil. He screamed that Dad would kill me. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Otis. "Jasmine," he shouted, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "The police just called me. They have Tyrell. They say he broke into your office. You have to drop the charges. He is your brother. He is a criminal, Otis," I said. "He broke into my business. He was just looking for information." Otis stammered, admitting to the conspiracy without realizing it. "We needed to know your bid price. We have to win this, Jasmine." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You sent your son to commit a felony because you are too incompetent to compete fairly." "You have to bail him out," Otis pleaded. "I don't have the cash. The accounts are frozen. The bond hearing is tomorrow morning. If he stays in jail, he will miss the bid presentation. He is the signatory on the fleet documents." "We need him." "That sounds like a logistics problem," I said. "Please, Jasmine." Otis wept. "I have nothing left." "You have a house," I said. "A big house in the suburbs. If you want your son out of jail, you better call a bail bondsman and put a lien on it." "You want me to mortgage my home?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "I want you to feel what it is like to lose everything," I said. I hung up. The next morning I checked the public records. Otis had done it. He had taken an emergency high-interest loan against his house to post Tyrell's bail. He had leveraged the last thing he owned to save the son he sent on a suicide mission. They were free, but they were broken. They were going into the bid presentation exhausted, humiliated, and leveraged to the hilt. And I was going in with a billionaire and the truth. The final battle was set, and I was going to make sure the whole world watched them fall. The conference room at the Department of Health was sterile and cold, with fluorescent lights that hummed a low note of anxiety. It was the kind of room where dreams went to die, buried under mountains of paperwork and red tape. I sat on the left side of the long mahogany table with Beatrice Thorne beside me, looking like a statue carved from granite and money. On the right side sat the remnants of the Williams dynasty. Otis was in a wheelchair, his back brace visible under his suit jacket, his face gray and clammy from the effort of just sitting upright. Tyrell sat next to him, looking like a ghost. He had been released on bail only 4 hours ago, and he still wore the same clothes he had been arrested in, smelling faintly of jail soap and fear. Dante sat on the other side, twitching. His eyes were bloodshot circles of exhaustion, and he kept tapping a pen against the table in a staccato rhythm that was driving everyone insane. And then there was Sarah sitting in the back row, designated for observers, wearing a cocktail dress at 10 in the morning, as if she were attending a gala instead of a government hearing. The panel of 5 government officials sat at the head of the table, looking bored. The director, a stern woman named Mrs. Alloway, tapped her watch. "Mr. Williams, you may begin your presentation," she said. Otis tried to stand but winced and sank back into the wheelchair. He gestured to Dante. "My son, the president, will lead the presentation." Dante stood up. He fumbled with the connection cable for the projector. It took him 3 agonizing minutes to get the screen to work. When the first slide finally flickered to life, I almost laughed out loud. It was a template I had designed 4 years ago. The font was outdated. The logo was the old pixelated version. They had not even bothered to update the copyright date at the bottom. Dante began to speak. His voice cracked. He started reading directly from the slides, reciting generic platitudes about commitment to excellence and family values. He did not talk about logistics. He did not talk about cold chain custody protocols or vaccine distribution timelines. He talked about legacy. Then came the lies. We operate a fleet of 50 state-of-the-art refrigerated trucks, Dante said, pointing to a stock photo of a truck that Williams Logistics definitely did not own. We have a 99% on-time delivery rating, and our warehouse is fully automated. Mrs. Galloway raised a hand. Mr. Williams, your financial disclosures indicate a significant drop in revenue over the last 2 quarters. How do you explain the discrepancy between your claimed fleet size and your registered assets with the Department of Transportation? Dante froze. He looked at Otis. Otis cleared his throat. Administrative lag. Otis lied smoothly, his voice gaining a bit of its old charm. We just acquired a competitor. The paperwork is still processing. We have the trucks director. I assure you. And your staffing levels, Galloway pressed. We require 24-hour dispatch for medical emergencies. Fully staffed, Dante said, sweating now. We have 3 shifts running 7 days a week. I looked at Beatrice. She raised an eyebrow. We both knew the warehouse was empty. We both knew the dispatch office was dark. They were lying to federal officials on public record. It was suicide. The presentation dragged on for another 20 minutes. Tyrell tried to show a spreadsheet, but he had forgotten to format the cells, so the numbers appeared as error codes. Sarah let out a loud sigh from the back row and started filing her nails. It was a disaster. It was unprofessional. It was pathetic. When Dante finally sat down, the silence in the room was heavy. The officials scribbled notes looking unhappy. They knew they were being sold a bill of goods, but they needed proof. Otis looked at me across the table. He smirked. He thought he had done it. He thought the lie was big enough to work. Mrs. Galloway looked at me. Ms. Williams, your rebuttal. I stood up. I did not have a flash drive. I did not have a cable. I simply opened my laptop and connected wirelessly to the screen because I had read the room specs beforehand. Good morning, I said. My name is Jasmine Williams, CEO of JW Global. With me is my partner Beatrice Thorne of Thorne International. We are not here to talk about family legacies. We are here to talk about risk. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. It was not a sales pitch. It was a slide titled, Market Risk Analysis, Williams Logistics. The air in the room changed instantly. Otis sat up straighter. Dante stopped tapping his pen. The government requires absolute reliability, I said, walking toward the screen. You cannot afford vendors who lie about their capacity. You cannot afford vendors who are insolvent. I clicked the remote again. A document appeared on the screen. It was a foreclosure notice. This is the current lien status of the personal residence of Otis Williams, CEO of the competing bidder, I said. It was filed yesterday to secure a bail bond for his son Tyrell Williams, who was arrested for breaking and entering into my secure facility to steal trade secrets. Tyrell let out a whimper. Otis turned a shade of purple that looked dangerous. Objection! Dante shouted, standing up. This is personal. It is public record, I said calmly. And it speaks to the financial stability of your leadership. If the CEO has to mortgage his home to keep his executives out of jail, how can he bond a $50 million contract? I clicked again. A spreadsheet appeared. These are the Department of Transportation safety records. I continued. Williams Logistics claims 50 trucks. According to the Federal Registry, they have 12 operational units. 4 of those are currently red-tagged for safety violations. I pointed to the data. You asked about their staffing. Here is a list of the unemployment claims filed by their former employees in the last 6 months. They have lost 80% of their workforce. The dispatch office they claimed is fully staffed is actually empty. I know this because those dispatchers now work for me. I looked at Mrs. Galloway. We are proposing a partnership with Thorne International. We have the capital, we have the trucks, and most importantly, we have the truth. We do not need to lie about our capabilities, because our track record speaks for itself. I clicked to my final slide. It was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the Williams Logistics proposal, full of holes and estimates. On the right was the JW Global proposal, lean, efficient, and backed by $1 billion balance sheet. You have a choice, I said. You can entrust the health of the state to a company that is currently drowning in debt and legal trouble, a company that relies on fraud to stay afloat. Or you can partner with a firm that values competence over nepotism. I sat down. The room was deadly silent. Otis looked like he had been shot. He stared at the screen where his failures were projected in high definition. He had gambled everything on this lie. He had leveraged his home, his reputation, and his freedom, and I had just turned the lights on. Mrs. Galloway did not need to consult with her colleagues. She closed her folder. The sound was final. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice cold, "the discrepancies between your presentation and the public records presented here are disturbing. Falsifying capacity on a federal bid is a felony." Otis sputtered. "Now wait just a minute. She is lying. She is just a jealous daughter. We will be launching a full investigation into your business practices." Mrs. Galloway continued, ignoring him. "As of this moment, Williams Logistics is disqualified from this bidding process and suspended from all future government contracts pending the audit results." Disqualified. The word hung in the air. Otis slumped in his chair. He looked small. He looked old. But Dante did not look small. He looked insane. He had watched his car get towed. He had watched his trust fund evaporate. And now he had watched his little sister burn down the last shelter he had. "You did this!" he screamed. He jumped over the table. It happened in slow motion. I saw his face contorted with rage. I saw Sarah stand up in the back screaming his name. I saw Beatrice flinch. I did not move. I did not flinch. I sat there and watched him come. He never reached me. The federal security officers stationed by the door moved faster than I expected. One of them tackled Dante in mid-air. He hit the floor with a heavy thud right in front of my feet. "Get off me!" he shrieked, struggling against the handcuffs. "She ruined us. She is the devil." Otis tried to stand up to help him, but his back gave out, and he collapsed back into the wheelchair, groaning in pain. Tyrell started crying silently, tears running down his face. Sarah was shouting about police brutality from the back row. It was chaos. It was the complete and total disintegration of the image they had tried so hard to protect. Mrs. Galloway looked at me. She looked shaken. "Ms. Williams," she said, "I apologize for this display." I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. I looked down at Dante, who was pressed against the carpet, his face mashed into the floor. "Do not apologize," I said. "This is just how they do business." I looked at the contract on the table. "Are we ready to sign?" I asked. Mrs. Galloway nodded. She pushed the papers toward me. I signed my name, Jasmine Williams, CEO. I handed the pen back. I looked at Otis one last time. He was holding his head in his hands. He was weeping. "It is done," I said. I signaled to Beatrice. We walked out of the room, leaving the guards to deal with the family that had tried to destroy me. As the doors closed behind us, I heard Dante still screaming my name. But it sounded faint now, like a ghost, like something from a past I had already left behind. The fallout from the Department of Health hearing was not a ripple, it was a tsunami. The news of the disqualification and the pending federal investigation hit the business wires before we even left the parking lot. By the time Otis managed to get Dante released on bail later that afternoon, the financial sharks were already circling the water. The First National Bank of Atlanta did not wait for a court order. They triggered the acceleration clause in the commercial mortgage loan that Otis had used to buy the headquarters 10 years ago. It was a standard clause that stated if the company came under federal investigation or if its credit rating dropped below a certain threshold, the entire balance of the loan was due immediately. Otis had violated both conditions before lunch. I was sitting in my office at JW Global, watching the news feed on my monitor when the alert came through. A foreclosure notice had been filed against the Williams Logistics commercial property. They were seizing this building. My sources told me it happened at 9 in the morning on Thursday. Otis was sitting in his office trying to shred documents when the bank representatives walked in, accompanied by two uniformed sheriff deputies. They did not knock. They did not ask for a meeting. They simply walked past the weeping receptionist and laid the paperwork on Otis's desk. Mr. Williams, the bank vice president, said, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "You are in default. We are exercising our right to seize collateral. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Otis tried to argue. He tried to bluster. He told them about his legacy. He told them about his friends in high places. But his friends were not picking up the phone anymore. Nobody wanted to be associated with a man who lied to the federal government. The bank manager simply checked his watch and told him that the locks would be changed at 5 o'clock on Friday. It was the end. The physical manifestation of his empire was being stripped away brick by brick. The warehouse where I had learned to drive a forklift, the office where I had negotiated my first deal, the break room where I had celebrated birthdays with staff who were no longer there. It was all going to the bank. I watched it happen from a distance, feeling a strange hollowness in my chest. I had wanted them to fail, but seeing the speed of the collapse was terrifying. It was a reminder that even the biggest castles are just piles of stone if the foundation is rotten. But I knew something Otis did not. The bank did not want to own a logistics facility. They wanted cash. They would look to offload the asset as quickly as possible to recoup their losses. They would sell it to the highest bidder in a fire sale. And I was the only one in town with liquidity and a motive. By Thursday afternoon, Otis was sitting in the ruins of his office drinking warm scotch out of a paper cup because the crystal tumblers had already been packed away. He was staring at a future that included bankruptcy court and possibly a prison cell. He needed a lifeboat. That was when Mr. Thorne walked in. He was not related to Beatrice, but he was a lawyer she used for her most aggressive acquisitions. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Tyrell's car, and he carried a briefcase that smelled of victory. I had briefed him perfectly. He knew exactly what buttons to push. Mr. Williams Thorne said, smoothing his tie, "I represent a private holding company. We specialize in distressed assets. We are aware of your situation with the bank." Otis looked up, his eyes bloodshot and hopeful. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are called Phoenix Ventures." Thorne lied smoothly. "My clients are interested in acquiring the physical assets of Williams Logistics. The building, the fleet, the equipment. We are willing to pay a lump sum that will cover your debt to the bank and leave you with enough to settle your legal fees." Otis sat up. He saw a way out. He saw a chance to avoid the humiliation of a public auction. "What is the catch?" Otis asked, suspicious but desperate. "No catch," Thorne said, opening his briefcase. "We want a quick sale. We take the assets, you keep the liabilities of the pending lawsuits, but you walk away debt-free on the property. We close tomorrow at noon." Otis hesitated. He looked around his office. He looked at the pictures of Dante and Tyrell on his desk. He thought he was being savvy. He thought he was making one last deal. "I want a consulting fee," Otis demanded, his ego flaring up one last time. "If you are buying my company, you need my expertise. I want a seat on the board." Thorne did not smile. He did not frown. He just slid the contract across the desk. "This is an asset purchase," Mr. Williams Thorne said, cold and professional. "We are not buying the company entity. We are buying the bricks and the trucks. There is no board. There is no consulting fee. There is just a check that keeps you out of debtor's prison. Take it or leave it." Otis looked at the contract. He looked at the door where the sheriffs were waiting. He picked up his pen. He did not read the fine print. He did not notice that the buyer was a shell company registered in Delaware. He did not ask who was behind Phoenix Ventures. He just signed. He signed away his legacy to a ghost. He thought he was saving himself. He did not realize he was handing the keys to the executioner. Thorne took the papers. He checked the signature. He snapped his briefcase shut. "The funds will be wired to the bank immediately," Thorne said, standing up. "The property transfer is effective as of noon tomorrow. Please ensure all personal effects are removed by then. The new owner will take possession at 1 o'clock. "Who is the new owner?" Otis asked, a flicker of curiosity penetrating his despair. "You will meet them tomorrow," Thorne said. He walked out, leaving Otis alone with his paper cup and his false sense of relief. Friday arrived with a gray, overcast sky that matched the mood inside the Williams Logistics headquarters. I arrived at the industrial park at 12:45, parking my car down the street so they wouldn't see me coming. I watched from a distance as my family carried boxes out to their cars. It was a pathetic parade. Dante was struggling with a box of golf trophies, his face pale and sweaty. Sarah was carrying armfuls of decorative pillows from the lounge she had designed, screaming at Dante to be careful with her things. Tyrell was just wandering around aimlessly, holding a stapler, looking like he had been lobotomized. And Otis walked behind them, clutching his framed newspaper clippings from 20 years ago, the only proof he had left that he used to be someone. They were arguing. I could hear their voices carrying across the parking lot. Sarah was blaming Dante for losing the car. Dante was blaming Tyrell for the data breach. Otis was blaming the government for being unfair. None of them blamed themselves. At 1 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up. Mr. Thorne got out. He nodded to me where I was waiting by my car. It was time. I walked across the parking lot. My heels clicked rhythmically on the asphalt, a sound I had made 1,000 times walking into this building, but never like this. I was wearing a white suit, sharp and pristine. I looked like the boss I had always been. Sarah saw me first. She was trying to stuff a fake ficus tree into the trunk of a rental car. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, dropping the tree. "You came to gloat. Haven't you done enough?" Dante spun around. His eyes narrowed. "Get out of here, Jasmine. This is private property." "Actually," I said, not breaking my stride. "It is private property, but it isn't yours." Otis looked up from the trunk of his car. He looked tired, broken and confused. "Jasmine," he said, "why are you here? Did you hear about the sale I sold it?" I got out. "I beat them." I stopped in front of him. I looked at the building behind him. The sign above the door still said Williams Logistics, but the paint was peeling. "You didn't beat anyone, Otis," I said. "You surrendered." "I sold to an investment group," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. "Smart money. They saw the value." I beckoned to Mr. Thorne, who was standing by the door holding a set of keys. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "is the paperwork finalized?" "It is, Ms. Williams," Thorne said, handing me the keys. "The deed is recorded. The transfer is complete. You are the sole owner of the property and all physical assets contained therein." Otis froze. He looked at Thorne. He looked at the keys in my hand. He looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the bumper of the car to stay upright. "You," he whispered, "you are Phoenix Ventures." "I am," I said, closing my fingers around the cold metal of the keys. "I bought the debt, Otis. I bought the building. I bought the trucks. I bought the chairs you are sitting on." "But that is impossible," Dante shouted. "You don't have that kind of money." "I have partners, Dante," I said. "Partners who trust me. Partners who know a good investment when they see one. And right now, this building is a great investment. For me." Sarah let out a sound like a dying cat. "You own the building. Does that mean we can stay? Does that mean Dante still has a job?" I looked at Sarah. I looked at her hopeful, greedy face. It was almost sad how quickly she pivoted from hating me to needing me. "No, Sarah," I said. "It means you are trespassing." Otis straightened up. He tried to summon the ghost of his authority. "Jasmine," he said, his voice shaking. "This is good. This keeps it in the family. We can work this out. I can stay on as a consultant. I know the building better than anyone. The boys can run the warehouse for you. We can rebuild. Together." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Together, I repeated, "You spent 35 years telling me I wasn't part of this family. You told me I was a waste of money. You told me my gender made me incompetent. And now you want to work together?" I stepped closer to him. "I didn't buy this company to save you, Otis," I said. "I bought it to evict you." I turned to Mr. Thorne. "Are they cleared out?" I asked. "Technically, they have until 1:15, Thorne said, checking his watch. "They have 5 minutes." I looked at my watch. "You heard the man," I said to my family. "You have 5 minutes to get your trash off my property. Anything left inside at 1:15 belongs to JW Global. And that includes the ficus tree Sarah." Dante lunged at me. He screamed. Two security guards I had hired stepped out from the building entrance. They were big. They were serious. Dante stopped in his tracks. "Don't," I said. "You are already facing fraud charges, Dante. Don't add assault to the list." Otis stared at me. There were tears in his eyes now. "I am your father," he whispered. "And I was your daughter," I said. "But you fired me. Remember, I turned my back on them." I walked toward the front door of the building. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. Behind me, I heard the chaotic sounds of my family scrambling to throw their boxes into their cars. I heard Sarah sobbing. I heard Tyrell asking if he could keep his office chair. I heard Otis weeping. I opened the door and walked into the cool, silent lobby. It smelled of old carpet and failure. I stood in the center of the room. I took a deep breath. It was time to redecorate. Otis wiped the tears from his eyes and adjusted his tie, attempting to regain the composure of a man who had not just been sobbing in a parking lot. He looked at the keys in my hand and then at the imposing brick building behind me, as if seeing it for the first time. The terror of bankruptcy was fading, replaced by a new delusional hope. He took a step toward me, his hands clasped together in a gesture that was half prayer and half negotiation. "This is actually perfect, Jasmine," he said, his voice gaining strength with every word. "It stays in the family. That is what matters, right? The Williams name stays on the door. I can work with this. I know I said some harsh things, but business is business. Now that you are the owner, you will need guidance. You have never run a facility this size. I can stay on as chairman emeritus, a consultant role. I will keep the corner office and we can structure a salary that covers my debts. Dante can handle the fleet management under your supervision, of course, and Tyrell can learn the ropes in sales." He smiled, a wide, brittle expression that didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a man who thought he could talk his way out of an execution. He genuinely believed that my purchase was a rescue mission. He thought I had spent millions of dollars just to give him his dignity back. I stared at him, feeling a cold detachment that frightened me slightly. I waited for him to finish painting his fantasy. I waited until he had assigned himself a salary and a title. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice flat. Otis blinked. "Well, yes. We should probably call a staff meeting to announce the transition." "There is no transition, Otis," I said. "You are confused about the nature of this transaction. I bought the assets of Williams Logistics. I bought the building, the land, the trucks, the inventory, and the intellectual property. I did not buy the liability. And the biggest liability this company has is its personnel." His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I did not hire you," I said. "I am not your partner. I am not your savior. I am your landlord and your liquidator. There is no chairman emeritus role. There is no job for Dante. There is no training program for Tyrell." "But we are the management team," Otis stammered. "You can't run this place without us." "I have a management team," I said. "They are currently working out of a rented office down the street, waiting for me to give the signal to move in. They are the people you fired. They are the people you mistreated. And they are infinitely more qualified than you or your sons." I looked at Dante and Tyrell, who were watching us with growing horror. "As of this moment, every employee of Williams Logistics is terminated," I announced. "You have no contracts because you never believed in them. You have no severance because there is no money in your accounts. You are unemployed. You can't do this, Dante shouted, stepping forward, his face twisting into a snarl. This is our company. You stole it. I bought it, I corrected him. With money I earned while you were sleeping, and now I want you off my property. Otis looked like he had been slapped. But Jasmine, family. Family is people who show up, I said. Family is people who treat you with respect. You are not family, Otis. You are a bad investment that I just wrote off. I turned to the security guards. Please escort these individuals to their personal vehicles, I said. Ensure they do not re-enter the building. If they resist, call the police and report them for trespassing. Otis opened his mouth to argue, but the look in my eyes stopped him. He saw something there he had never seen before. He saw the absolute absence of fear. He realized for the first time that his power over me was not just broken, it was non-existent. He slumped his shoulders, the fight draining out of him, leaving just a tired old man standing in a parking lot he used to own. Sarah had been watching the exchange from near her rental car, her eyes darting back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. When she heard the word terminated, she didn't seem to process it. She was too focused on the white Range Rover, parked in the executive spot next to the entrance. It was the only tangible thing left of her status, the only piece of the lifestyle she clung to. She ran toward the SUV, her heels clacking on the pavement. She reached for the door handle, but one of my security guards, a large man named Mike, stepped in front of her. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mike said politely but firmly. "That vehicle is company property." Sarah stopped her hand, hovering in the air. "What are you talking about?" she shrieked. "That is my car. It is my Range Rover. Dante got it for me." I walked over to her. "The car is leased under the corporate entity, Sarah," I explained calmly. "When I acquired the assets, I acquired the leases. This car belongs to JW Global now." "No," she screamed, stomping her foot like a toddler. "You can't take my car. It has my car seat in it. It has my gym bag. You are just doing this to be spiteful. I am doing this because it is a $70,000 asset that I need to liquidate to pay for the roof repairs." "You ignored," I said. "You can retrieve your personal items, but the keys stay with Mike." She looked at Dante, pleading with her eyes. "Do something," she begged. "Tell her she can't take my car." Dante looked at his feet. He knew. He knew he had signed the lease agreement that listed the car as fleet equipment to get a tax write-off. He had trapped himself in his own greed. "Give her the keys, Sarah," he mumbled. Sarah let out a wail that echoed off the brick walls of the warehouse. She threw her purse on the ground. She screamed that we were all monsters. She screamed that she was going to sue, but eventually she opened her bag, took out the fob, and threw it at Mike. "I hope you crash it," she hissed at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. "I won't be driving it, Sarah," I said. "I drive a sedan that I paid for. This is going to auction on Monday." Mike opened the car door and let her take out a booster seat and a yoga mat. She stood there on the asphalt, holding her possessions, looking small and ridiculous. Tyrell was the quietest. He walked up to me holding a framed photo of himself fishing. It was the only thing he had taken from his office. "Can I keep my chair?" he asked softly. "It is the ergonomic one. My back hurts." I looked at my younger brother. He wasn't malicious like Dante or cruel like Otis. He was just useless. He was a product of a system that had never asked him to be anything other than a warm body in a suit. "No, Tyrell," I said. "The chair stays. Go home." He nodded sadly and walked toward his car. The parking lot was clearing out. Otis got into his sedan alone. Dante and Sarah got into their rental car, arguing violently before the doors even closed. Tyrell drove away in his sports car, which I knew would be repossessed within the month. I stood there until the last taillight disappeared around the corner. Then I turned and walked into the building. The lobby was silent. The receptionist's desk was empty. I walked past the cubicles where my team used to sit. I walked down the hallway to the executive suite. I pushed open the double doors to my father's office. It smelled of cigars and stale ambition. I walked to the desk. I picked up the nameplate that read Otis Williams, CEO, and dropped it into the trash can. I sat down in the massive leather chair. It was still warm. I spun it around to face the window. I looked out over the industrial park over the city of Atlanta, stretching out to the horizon. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. "Bring the team over," I said. "We have a new home." 1 year later, the view from my office was different. I had remodeled. The dark wood and leather were gone, replaced by glass and light and modern steel. The warehouse below was humming with activity, running 24 hours a day to fulfill the government contract. JW Global was no longer a startup. We were the dominant logistics provider in the Southeast. My personal assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Williams," she said, "you have a visitor in the lobby. He says he is your father. He says he doesn't have an appointment, but it is urgent." I turned my chair. I looked at the calendar on my screen. It was full. Meeting with the state governor at 2. Review of the international expansion plan at 4. Dinner with Beatrice at 7. "Tell him I am unavailable," I said. My assistant hesitated. "He says he needs money for rent, Miss Williams. He says he is going to be evicted." I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Not guilt, not sorrow. Just a distant memory of a girl who used to beg for $5,000 to fix a roof. Otis was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a suburb 40 minutes away. My mother had left him 6 months ago when the last of the savings ran out. She was living with her sister in Florida, claiming she was a victim of his financial mismanagement. Dante was driving for a food delivery app, his license suspended for unpaid tickets. Sarah had divorced him the moment the money dried up and was currently looking for a new husband on dating apps. Tyrell was working the night shift at an Amazon fulfillment center, a delicious irony that I appreciated every time I thought about it. They were all exactly where their competence had led them. "Give him this," I said, pulling a card from my desk drawer. It was a business card for a local temp agency, one that specialized in entry-level labor. "Tell him they are hiring night watchmen," I said. "Tell him if he works hard, he might get a raise in 6 months." My assistant smiled. She took the card and left. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I touched the cool glass. They had told me I was a waste of money. They had told me I was nothing without them. They had told me my gender made me weak. I looked at the empire I had built. I looked at the employees leaving the building, laughing and talking, heading home to families they could support because I paid them fairly. I wasn't a waste of money. I was the best investment they never made. I turned off the lights in my office. I walked out past the bustling team, past the awards on the wall, past the logo that bore my name. I walked to my car and drove home to a house that did not leak to a life that was entirely my own. I had bought my peace, and it was worth every penny. This story teaches us that your true value is never determined by those who refuse to see it, even if they share your blood. Jasmine proved that competence and integrity will always outlast greed and nepotism. When you stop begging for a seat at a table where you aren't respected, you gain the freedom to build your own empire. True success isn't just about money. It's about walking away from toxicity and realizing that you were never the problem, you were the solution they couldn't afford. You are not a liability. You are the best investment you can make. If you've ever had to build your own table because no one offered you a seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience.